Heuermann is from Long Island. He's lived here all his life in this neighborhood many years. People here are completely shocked. They say he just does not fit the profile of who they believe would be connected to such a horrific cold case.
Straight up on 8 a.m. right now, and we are coming to you with breaking news. This just into the Pix 11 newsroom. These are live images out of Suffolk County, Long Island, and Massapequa Park, where we're being told, and this is big news here at the top of the hour, that there has been an arrest in the Gilgo Beach murder case, which we've been following over the years here. This is a massive police response here in Massapequa Park, and these are live images that we're closely following.
As you can see right now, we know Suffolk County, Nassau County, and New York State investigators are all on this scene here. One person, we're told, is in custody, but that person's connection to the decades-old spree of unsolved murders is still not totally disclosed. But Mary Murphy has been looking into all of this.
Mary Murphy has been on this case from the very beginning. Our intrepid reporter, she's joining us now on the phone with these breaking details. Mary, good morning. What do you know?
Good morning, Dan and Calla. I can tell you that it is a man that was arrested this morning in Massapequa Park, which is right near the Nassau County, Suffolk County border. And Massapequa has always been part of this case because we reported early on, about 10 years ago, that there was a ping that came from one of the victims' phones that went to a tower in Massapequa. And a senior law enforcement source just spoke to me this morning. He confirmed the arrest. And we understand that there will be some kind of an indictment unsealed out in Riverhead later today, and that the suspect will be taken out to Riverhead. No name yet, but I'm told he's middle-aged to senior in age, between his 50s and his 60s, which would make sense because some of these victims were found back as far back as 1996. 2 legs were found in Davis Park near Fire Island. But the real big beginning of this investigation was December 2010 when the first 4 victims were found along Ocean Parkway in Gilgo Beach.
I mean, Mary, this has been years in the making, right? Documentaries, movies been made about this very case. Rodney Harrison, the Suffolk County Police Commissioner, even formed a specialized unit to investigate these murders, and he said he believed there would be an arrest in the near future, and here we are today. Any word, Mary, I know this is early on and you're just getting word of these details, on how police were able to navigate their way to Massapequa Park and this specific individual?
Well, what you know that the task force was formed in February this year. It involved the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office, the Police Department in Suffolk County, Nassau County was involved, the FBI, the state police, a huge task force. And I did learn this morning that within a month, this suspect was identified. But then you have the work of DNA. You also had extensive phone analysis that was done. Now, what made the case difficult was it was believed that the killer was using a burner phone. So when he would make the dates with some of these victims who were sex workers, a lot of them, he would use a burner phone. So those are harder to track down. But the thing about Massapequa just stands out to me because I've long reported that there was a ping that came from one of the victims' phones. And the killer apparently was taunting the younger sister of one victim using the victim's phone and saying very nasty things. And there was a ping that went from Penn Station and then apparently along the railroad and then Massapequa. So this makes sense that they found someone in Massapequa.
Mary, can you go over, I know in the past your reporting has included so many of the victims' families. Police have said that over half of the victims worked as prostitutes at some point. Can you talk about what these victims' families have gone through over the last decade trying to track down a killer with very little leads?
Well, first of all, they were concerned early on that no one cared because these young women were sex workers. But they repeatedly went out to Ocean Parkway between Gilgo and Oak Beaches, because Oak Beach is also a big part of this investigation. And they repeatedly went out there and they held vigils, and they would not be unheard. And finally, they were heard. You know, there was a big thing made about the Suffolk County Police Department, the prior administration, that they shut down the investigation, allegedly, that they wouldn't allow the FBI to come in. But then several years ago, right before the pandemic, a new police commissioner had come in, Geraldine Hart, and she used to work with the FBI. and she brought the FBI back in. And also during the pandemic, one of the unknown victims was identified, Valerie Mack, through the use of familial DNA genealogy. So the FBI was able to put some of the DNA into one of those ancestral type sites, and they identified one of the previously unknown victims. We're not sure if that helped in this case. We'll find out, we hope, later today.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're looking at live images right here, Mary, from the Massapequa Park crime scene, where you see that massive police presence there. Obviously a massive police presence with this decades-old serial killer case that you have been on since the very beginning. But Mary, what are your sources telling you about the moment they were able to locate this individual, if anything? I know, like I said, it's early on, so the details here are still coming in. You know, was this an easy arrest? What exactly happened the moment police arrived there on the scene?
Well, the thing is, the person who confirmed for me did us a favor. And I think it was because we have spent so long reporting on this case. And there have been so many twists and turns, as you know. So I can't tell you right at this second what happened the minute they went in.
Yeah.
I can just tell you that apparently the suspect may already be on his way to Riverhead, because that's where the bail hearing is going to be. And there's going to be an extensive bail hearing. And I believe details will come out there about how they nailed this suspect, who is believed to be in his 50s or his 60s. And, you know, we should point out that there were so many people talked about as persons of interest in the past.
A police commissioner.
Yeah, well, the chief of police, because, you know, James Burke, he was the chief of department, the highest ranking uniformed officer in Suffolk County. He got into trouble for assaulting a person that was in custody because items had been stolen out of his police vehicle, and some of them were embarrassing. And he went and assaulted the guy at one of the precincts. And there was a lot of talk and belief that he was stymieing the investigation. And people speculated, oh, was he involved? But I was told by numerous law enforcement officials in recent years that he was ruled out. Another person who was really looked at was this carpenter, John Bitroff, who was arrested on a cold case, I believe it was around 2014, 2015. And, you know, he was accused of killing 2 sex workers, later convicted. They were found out in Manorville. And he was interesting to look at because some of the torsos connected to the Gilgo case were found in Manorville. But Bitroff apparently is not the one arrested. He's in prison. Yeah. And this person lived in Massapequa Park.
Mary, are you able to go over again, what is this scene here at First Avenue at Massapequa Park that we are showing live pictures of? Why is this relevant?
It's relevant because this is where the elusive suspect in the Long Island serial killer case, there are 2 names for this alleged killer. We first called him the Gilgo Beach serial killer because the first 4 victims were found in Gilgo Beach along Ocean Parkway. But later, a lot of people that worked this case extensively called him LISK, which was short for Long Island serial killer, because the victims' body parts were found in various parts of Long Island, not just Gilgo Beach. Some of the women, their torsos were found in Manorville, which is 40 miles to the east. And then when this investigation really went into high gear in 2010, 2011, some of their body parts, other body parts, were found along Ocean Parkway, and that's when those connections were made. In terms of the scene in Massapequa Park, obviously this is one of the biggest law enforcement arrests we've reported on in some time. It's not often that we deal with serial killers, and this one eluded us for a very long time. So the fact that law enforcement believes they have him, that's huge. And that's why you're seeing the really big presence out in Massapequa Park where this man was living.
A massive response to these live images, like you said, Mary, with all agencies involved here, this multi-agency approach and arrest. Mary, I appreciate you. Nobody is matched to your reporting. It is unbelievable the amount of details you were able to get on a short amount of time. You have been on this case since the very beginning. We thank you for waking up with us, and I know you're going to be all over this throughout the day, Mary, so we'll let you go, work your sources, but appreciate you this morning.
All right. Have a good morning.
All right, Mary.
Thank you,
Mary's going to be all over this case. We have Kirsten Cole headed to that scene as well, and we have other crews headed to the Riverhead Courthouse where that arraignment is going to take, or the indictment is going to be unsealed later on today. But again, a massive Massive police response here in Massapequa Park with an arrest made, like you heard Mary Murphy reporting, to the Gilgo Beach murder serial killer. This is an unbelievable event that we're watching here at 8:09 this morning. Murphy joining us on the phone, who has been on this story since day one. And Mary, you just heard from Kirsten Cole there in the neighborhood talking about this individual who is a father of 2 daughters, a family man there living in that middle of that community. What else do you know as we are approaching 9:10 this morning with these breaking details?
Well, Kirsten just said his age, if indeed this is the suspect, and he did live in that house, and there was a suspect brought out of the house early this morning. So the pieces all seem to align. The suspect has been brought out to Riverhead Criminal Court, where there will be an indictment that's unsealed later today, followed by a press conference. I am told that within a month of starting the task force with the Suffolk Police Department, the Suffolk District Attorney's Office, the FBI, the state police, within a month, this suspect was identified. And then, of course, you got to put all the pieces together. And as we talked about in the last hour, the pings from the phone were crucial in this case. A lot of phone analysis has been done along with DNA analysis. But what always fascinated me and what we reported on a long time ago was that a ping came from one victim's phone near Penn Station, where the suspected killer called one victim's sister and taunted her about what he had done to her sister. Now, that ping also was near a Long Island Railroad station in Massapequa, and now we find out this morning the suspect in the Long Island serial killer case, the Gilgo Beach investigation, he lives in Massapequa Park, a married father of 2. According to Kirsten. And we will find out a lot more during the bail hearing because I believe a lot of details will be released in court. But Massapequa was always at the center of this investigation, according to one senior law enforcement source. And Midtown was always at the center of this. And Kirsten mentioned Commissioner Harrison. We had interviewed him when he first came into office in Suffolk County after leaving a long career in the NYPD, and he vowed, we are going to solve this case, no stone unturned.
Mary, I want to talk to you about the victims who you've talked to for over 20 years at this point. Tell us what they've gone through, and have you reached out to any of the victims or their attorneys this morning so far, and what have you heard?
Well, I am going to be reaching out to some of the sisters of the victims. I haven't spoken to them yet, but they would keep in touch with me anytime there would be a development. They wanted to know if I felt they were closer to making an arrest, the police. You know, a lot of things have happened in the last few years. You mentioned the release of the 911 tape, Shannon Gilbert. If Shannon Gilbert had not disappeared, this case may never have opened up. Because she disappeared, because a dog, a canine dog, found 4 sets of remains in the brush in December of 2010. That's what started this whole thing. The first 4 remains, most of them were wrapped in burlap, and the victims were intact. Their names were Melissa Bartholomew, Megan Waterman, Maureen Brainerd Barnes, and Costello, Amber Costello. So those were the first 4, and they were intact, but other victims were dismembered. Some of them were just only identified in the last couple of years. A woman named Valerie Mack, her torso was found out in Manorville 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago. And it wasn't until last year, a couple of years ago, that she was identified through genetic genealogy, familial genealogy. One of those ancestry sites linked the remains to a woman upstate who was a relative. There was a belt that Kirsten mentioned that the killer may have handled. So the victims are different ages, obviously. The youngest is a toddler. And she was found near a man who was dressed in women's clothing, another unidentified victim he was found close to the toddler. But the toddler's mother is also considered a victim. Her nickname was Peaches. She was found at the other end of Ocean Parkway, and parts of her body were found in Hempstead Lake State Park. So the victims have been found, parts of the victims all the way out to Manorville, 40 miles from Gilgo Beach, and some of them have been found near Jones Beach, some body parts found near Davis Park, Fire Island.
Yeah.
So it's a crime scene that extends a long way.
It is a very large swath of Long Island that we're talking about here. But in particular, Mary, those 4 that you're mentioning and Shannon Gilbert, that tied back to Gilgo and Oak Beaches, right? And just for those who aren't familiar with the geography of Long Island, right? Massapequa Park, not at all far from Oak Beach and Gilgo Beach. It's really just across a bay, right?
Yeah, it's very close, South Shore of Long Island, and you can travel from Ocean Parkway and get into Gilgo Beach, Oak Beach from Massapequa, very close to the Suffolk County border, Massapequa Park. So it was always said that the killer had to be familiar with the geography of Long Island, and it seems that this person was. It's going to be very interesting to hear what comes out in court, but, bears repeating that the phones were a big part of this, extensive phone analysis, although the killer, I'm told, used a burner phone. He was very careful in most cases not to be traceable. However, he allegedly used one victim's phone to taunt her family, and that could have played a big role in ultimately solving this case.
Mary, I'd love to know, based on your expertise, what do you make of this? This man was living among the community right under investigators' noses and has been sought after for the past 3 decades. What do you think of the description of him being a family man, having 2 kids, married, living in Massapequa Park, a well-to-do area, and involved in the community?
Well, I'm not surprised because these things have happened before. We had the serial killer in California who was a former police officer. He wasn't found until he was in his 70s, and that was with the help of genetic genealogy. That has become so important in solving a number of these serial killer cases, and I will be interested to hear if it played a role in this case. It's not surprising. I don't think the profile is really that unusual. I would think that the people that were looking into this case thought it might be a white male, possibly married. There was another person they looked at. I mentioned this in the last hour, John Bitroff. He was a carpenter in Manorville, and he was accused in 2 early 90s murders of sex workers, and they were posed in a certain position. Both of them were missing their left shoe. It seemed ritualistic almost. But it seems like Bitroff is not the suspect. I should mention, in the course of looking at this case, which really started for me at the end of 2010, when they discovered the 4 women on Ocean Parkway. During the course of this investigation, we've gone to Atlantic City because there were 4 sex workers that were found there behind a motel, and they were all positioned facing the boardwalk in Atlantic City where all the casinos are. So there was talk that maybe the killer had been involved in their deaths. So there's a lot, obviously, to unpack, but I believe we will start getting a lot of answers in court, and then, of course, we'll continue investigating.
Mary, on a personal level, I just want to know, what does this development feel like you? Because for most of our longtime viewers, they know that you've covered this story for over 2 decades, and you've been with the victims' families along the way. You've followed every development here of every possible suspect. So knowing that an arrest has been made in connection with this case, what does that development mean to you?
Well, it's just kind of like I was stunned this morning because I spoke to someone high-ranking yesterday about a missing person, and I asked about Gilgo, and I was told that, genetic genealogy was being utilized to identify victims, never thinking an arrest was going to come the next morning, early in the morning. In terms of Shannon Gilbert, so much has happened in that case. Her mother was killed by another sister of Shannon's. So a lot of sadness associated with this case. Mary Gilbert was often out on Ocean Parkway with her other daughters and other family members of victims, demanding that these women be treated with dignity, and that answers come in this investigation.
Heuermann is from Long Island. He's lived here all his life in this neighborhood many, many years. People here are completely shocked. They say he just does not fit the profile of who they believe would be connected to such a horrific cold case. An idyllic neighborhood on Long Island's South Shore. A portrait of American suburbia turned into a spectacle after police arrested who they believe is the Gilgo Beach serial killer, Rex Heuermann. Born and raised on Long Island, no one in his Massapequa Park neighborhood saw it coming.
It's a complete shock. You never know. It's always in your own backyard, but you didn't realize it.
Dave, a school bus driver, recalls seeing the 59-year-old architect, married, father of two, several times.
I think I've seen this gentleman in front of his house 3 or 4 times. He looked like a normal person. And it looks like a person that would be non-physical, that would be capable of doing an act of violence like this.
But law enforcement officials announced Heuermann's arrest Friday in connection to 3 of the murdered sex workers in the case and hinted that charges for the 4th victim could come soon. The earliest victims could date back to at least 1996.
I almost forgot about the case for so long because it's been 13 years, and to think that he was just now found is wild, and he was living a normal life just like everybody.
The arrest follows a long-winded investigation that involved tracking his burner phones and DNA testing that linked the suspected killer to the victims, including strands of hair and a pizza box retrieved from outside his Manhattan office. A monumental break in the cold case, which is connected to at least 10 human remains.
It's definitely creepy.
All day Saturday, investigators in hazmat suits were seen entering Heuermann's home, which some here say sticks out from the others in the neighborhood.
And it definitely struck me that it looks completely different from the other houses. It looks just like it hasn't been maintained, it hasn't been taken care of. It just looks like it's kind of fallen apart, which is especially strange because I heard he's an architect.
And Heuermann's next court date is set for August 1st. He is being held without bail. And I can tell you, Kaidi, it just feels unreal right now in this neighborhood. That's the latest from here in Massapequa Park. Amy and
Suspected Gilgo Beach serial killer taken into custody last week, Rex Heuermann, a married father of 2, will be in court again on August 1st.
The suspect's 12-year killing spree came to an end last week when members of that task force took him into custody near his office in Manhattan. Joining us this morning is Suffolk County District Attorney Ray Tierney on what exactly happens now. So, DA Tierney, good to see you here on the couch, and such a huge story.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you being here. Let me begin with this first question that's been on the mind of so many who have been asking me this since this broke last week. That this suspect was tied to those 3 women, a possible 4th, right? That's what he's charged with. But do you believe that Rex Heuermann is the prime suspect for all of the bodies along Gilgo Beach? Or is there a possible other serial killer out there?
So we looked at this this case. You know, I got into office January 2022. We formed the task force February 1st of 2022. We identify him as a suspect in March. We've been off and running ever since. We're working on what has been traditionally called the Gilgo 4. We're working on that, and we have no evidence with regard to participation by anybody else.
Okay, but then let's talk about the 3 and that possible 4th. Do you believe that Rex Heuermann worked alone, or is there an accomplice you're looking for?
There's no evidence of any accomplices.
Okay.
We know that he's married. He has 2 kids. Is it possible that any of these killings took place in their family home?
So, you know, we had, during the bail application, we talked about 5 question hairs. We had 3 of those hairs tested. We're awaiting further analysis on 2 of them. But with regard to the 3, one of the DNA profile from one of those hairs matched the defendant, and the DNA profile from 2 of those hairs matched his wife. So really the only explanation for that would be transfer. In other words, person A comes in contact with person B, and then person B has person A's hair come in contact with person C, or the victim and the defendant were at a location, you know, either a car or the house where the wife would be.
And is the wife and children cooperating, and did they know about this suspicious behavior?
So we don't believe that the wife and family knew.
They were out of town.
Yeah, and knew about, yes. And during the commission of the 3 murders, travel records show that they were out of New York State during the commission of all 3 of those murders.
So we had our Pixel drone over the house as we watched the investigators, the men and women, bringing out some of that evidence that you were talking about, right? So much evidence that is found inside that home, which we were told by the commissioner earlier this morning is a very cluttered atmosphere. Can you talk about some of the items that you're removing and the significance of them? And was there anything in terms of a murder weapon found inside?
Sure. So, with regard to our search warrants, one of the key pieces of evidence here are hairs, fibers, DNA. So you're talking about evidence on a molecular level. So when we execute search warrants, we start with all of those really small things, and then we're looking for anything and everything, computers, cell phones. So it's a painstaking process as those forensic investigators go over that house inch by inch by inch. So, I mean, that's why it's taking such a long time.
Well, yeah, and there was this talk of the storage facility in Amityville that's being searched this morning as well. So I'm guessing it's the similar things you're looking for. But when you talk about body parts and trophies, anything jumping out that immediately ties him?
Well, so the women, they were intact, so we're not necessarily looking for that. But, we are looking for mementos, trophies, or really anything that could link this defendant back to those women or those crime scenes.
Have you found anything? I mean, we heard about left shoes. We heard about this hammer that's been used. We heard about the hemp that they were wrapped around.
So the amount of evidence that we're getting, both digital, forensically, and otherwise, is massive.
You're trying so hard not to say something
well,
right now.
You know what we do? What we do is we don't talk. We don't make conjecture. I don't, at least. We don't talk about what we think. We talk about what we know, and we get it back in the lab. We examine it. We're careful. And then we make our conclusions.
And I just want to zero in on that hammer for a moment, because there was this video that I'm sure you've seen that kind of circulated, this interview that he did, right, that was put out there, where he talks about this architect's hammer, and that's how it's his favorite weapon, or favorite tool. Was that at all found, and are you looking for that item?
We're looking for everything, but I will say, with regard to the autopsy done on the 4 women, the cause of death was homicidal violence, and that encompasses a broad category. And basically, what it means is there was no overt injury to the body. So there was no fractures or anything like that.
Okay,
or obvious gunshot wounds or something.
I want to talk about this watershed moment in the case, because I think it's so important. Like you said, you took over in January of 2022. February is when that task force was created, but it was March when these ties were made of Rex Heuermann to a Chevy Avalanche, right? And that is really kind of what jump-started everything for the next year and a half. Can you talk about that moment?
Sure. So the day before Amber Costello, the last victim, she disappeared on September 2nd of 2010. On September 1st, she had interaction with an individual who was driving an Avalanche, and also the physical description was of a very large man, 6'4" to 6'6", very thickly built, just a large individual, white glasses, a thick dark hair, so when we saw that this defendant owned an Avalanche, we also saw that he lived in Massapequa Park and worked in Midtown Manhattan. And that was significant because he lived and worked in a constrained area where the FBI had determined there was cell phone usage of interest to the case. So all of those things, sort of fit together. So from March 14, 2022, about 6 weeks after we started the task force, we focused in on this individual, and we were sort of off and running. And then we went back, of course, and we examined the hairs through mitochondrial DNA analysis, and then we got those profiles. So, but the watershed moment was that March 14th.
Incredible police work.
I have to ask about this woman who was riding a bike in the park, and she claims that recently Rex Heuermann jumped out and was taunting her and harassing her to the point where she filed a police report. She took the time to do that. Was he under surveillance 24/7? Did you know about that? And were you worried that he was tracking other women?
So he was under surveillance, physical and otherwise. So we're continuing to look into that. And during my press conference, what I did talk about was this tension, this balance between gathering evidence and getting the evidence that you need to establish your case in secret, which is effective, while also considering public safety. And because he was continuing to use burner phones, and because he was continuing to contact sex workers, that was notwithstanding the surveillance, that was concerning to us, and that is why, one of the reasons why that Thursday we decided, we need to take this down.
That was my question, right? Because I asked the police commissioner earlier about why Thursday, why that very moment. So over the past year and a half, since he came on your radar, he had been using and seeing face-to-face sex workers.
Correct.
And during that time that he was meeting those women, he was under surveillance. So you didn't fear for those women's safety?
So what was happening was, we went back and had the 4 burner phones that we used. We were able to link the defendant to those. And then we continued to work backwards, but we're always a little bit behind. And it wasn't until very recently that we caught up. And then once we caught up, that caused us concern because now we had sort of confirmation of that he was, corresponding with workers.
It's incredible police work, a multi-agency approach to all of this.
I just have to ask one more question about him being behind bars. Is he under suicide watch? And I know that he was crying, saying he didn't do it.
Well, so he, the sheriff, we have a very professional sheriff, and he actually touched upon this in the press conference. He is being appropriately monitored because we want to keep him safe, and we want to make sure that he has his day in court.
DA Tierney, keep us posted as the investigation continues. I know you have a lot of work ahead of you, but appreciate you making the time this morning here in person to talk about this.
And thank you so much.
All right. Welcome to Suffolk County Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison, who started this very task force. So, Commissioner, thank you for being here for your live appearance on the Pix Up Morning News. Good to see you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Let me begin first and foremost, Commissioner, with the surveillance video that was released of this arrest. We see the suspect walking down Fifth Avenue. Take us that moment, Commissioner, and why it was that very moment that you decided to move in.
So there was some concerns. The case was in the grand jury. We had to wait for the indictment for it, but we were concerned about some leaks and it getting out. And if it gets out and it gets to his attention, now it makes the investigation a whole lot more difficult. So after confirming with my partner Ray Tierney and discussing that this is something that we should move in right away, we chose to catch him at work and wait for him to come out and grab him right away.
You got him right near his job in Midtown
Yeah.
Manhattan. I think it was near 35th Street, not far from Penn Station. I want to ask you about starting the task force. That made a really big difference. You came to the Suffolk Police Commissioner's office the end of 2021. You held a press conference almost immediately. What difference did that task force make?
It made a lot, but the one thing I do want to share is it's not about me creating a task force. I want to kind of get away from that. I want to talk about the men and the women that were part of the task force and the great work that they did under Detective Lieutenant Kevin Byra. When I first got into the position of being police commissioner, I wanted to make sure that this was the right guy for the spot. And I brought him into the office, and me being a former chief of department and running ComStat meetings, I asked a lot of questions. Are we looking at jail calls? Are we debriefing prisoners? Are we looking at a host of other things that could possibly lead us in the right direction? And a 3-hour meeting, the man did not look at a piece of paper.
Right. So he knew it in his head.
He knew,
I got to get specific about one thing, the Chevy avalanche. That made the difference here. And your team re-interviewed a witness from early in the case, and that second interview made all the difference. What details did he give you? I think he even gave you a description of the suspect.
Yeah, so one of the investigators that were assigned to the task force from the state police, Tiffany Atai, she was really somebody that kind of moved the needle in the investigation. And
she knocked the wall down.
Yeah, pretty much knocked the wall down. Well said. But we were able to now track this green avalanche to that little box in Massapequa Park. We re-interviewed the individual who kind of gave us a better description of Rex Heuermann, and saying pretty much he had bushy hair, these big glasses, and was the size of an ogre. And that really helped us get this case going in the right direction.
Was Rex ever on your radar prior to that very moment? And was he the only suspect that fit the profile of the serial killer?
So we didn't have a profile of him. We just had some bodies that were discovered on Ocean Parkway. So in regarding having an actual description, we didn't have that at the time. But Was the vehicle something that we were aware of? Yes, that's accurate.
Commissioner, when I spoke to you shortly after, you talked about that task force after you took office. You said that you would use your experience in really navigating other departments, bringing that legacy to Suffolk County Police Department. So now you have the suspect's DNA, right? And will that be loaded into this database that so many organizations use to see if he's connected to other unsolved murders?
Yeah, of course. One of the reasons why we're successful in law enforcement is making sure that we use our science, our technology, in order to link perpetrated subjects to crime. So that's going to be something that we're
including the NYPD.
Including NYPD.
You know, Commissioner, there were at least 6 other victims. Some of them are unidentified. Some of them were dismembered, found along Ocean Parkway. And do you think that another killer might have done that, or do you think it's the same killer?
Time will tell. That's my response to that. Is we're still trying to see what else Rex might have been into, and we still are going to keep the task force in place and work with our partners and continue to try to solve these other outstanding investigations.
So let's talk about what's happening now, right? So he, of course, had his court arraignment on Friday, but now there's many pieces of evidence that you are gathering from his home in Massapequa Park, which we'll get to in just a second. But news this morning, Commissioner, is that there's a new location, this Amityville storage locker that is being searched. Was that owned or rented by Rex, and what are you looking for there?
Well, anything that he had a connection to, any type of storage facility, his residence, his place of work, we have to get search warrants and go through the property. Are there body parts or things that we need to take a look at? Are there trophies of some of the victims that, unfortunately, that he stored in that location? So we're going through there right now. That was on our radar. This is not a new developing part of the investigation, but we are going through it, and we're going to see what it could link to help us with the case.
I think what's really disturbing that came out in court was that this suspect allegedly was going all over the internet searching for information not only about his victims but about families. He was also looking up child porn. He was also looking up torture porn, and it seems like a real double life.
Mary, he's a monster. He's a monster, and I'll say that with a level of conviction. And I'm just so proud of the men and women of the task force. We were able to get this monster off the streets.
Commissioner, I mean, the neighbors in that neighborhood obviously shocked that he was living among them this entire time in that red house that was kind of stuck out like a sore thumb on that block.
It did.
Now that you have the investigators, we have this drone video from our Pix 11 drone that captured the men and women going into the home in their Tyvek suits, bringing out some of the evidence. Can you talk about what you were looking for inside the home at all? I know it's an ongoing investigation.
It is an ongoing investigation, but anything that could help us connect him to maybe other crimes that may be on that Ocean Parkway or anywhere else, we want to take a look at. But it's a very cluttered house. It looked like he was like a pack rat with a lot of different things in there. So disturbing individual.
I think what was also interesting, Dan, is that his wife was always out of town when these murders happened, according to what's said in the indictment. What do you make of that? Well, and her DNA was found on some of the victims, and it could have been transferred from his clothing.
Well, I think we stated before, he was living a double life, you know, and he capitalized on some of his horrible activities when she was out of town. But once again, we did a lot of great work. It took us a while. This police department got scrutinized unfairly. I'll make sure that's very clear. But coming together, we got the job done. But we still got some more work to do.
Yeah, Commissioner, I know we're out of time, but I just want to go back to the initial question, right? You said you moved in because of the fear of leaks. Did you ever fear that any other women were in danger?
Of course. You know, that's another reason why we moved in. Regarding moving in that quickly on that day, not necessarily, but we took a look at where we were with the investigation and said, you know what, we gotta move forward with the case. Let's put it in grand jury. Let's get an indictment and let's get him off the streets.
Suffolk County Police Commissioner Rodney Harrison, appreciate you and all the work of the men and women in this department. And Mary.
One of history's most prolific serial killers, Dennis Rader, known as BTK, now weighing in on the Long Island serial killer case from behind bars. The man who bound, tortured, and killed 10 people in Kansas, writing in a letter to a national media outlet that Rex Heuermann is his clone.
He likes to interject himself because my dad considers himself like one of the big time guys.
Though his estranged daughter, Carrie Rawson, admits there are striking similarities.
Both are 59 when they were arrested. They're both family men. They both had 2 kids. They both lived in the suburbs. They both held jobs for the whole time. Neither of them had an arrest record. They both strangle. They both bind.
One of Heuermann's alleged victims of the Gilgo 4 was Amber Costello.
I miss her terribly.
Her aunt, Bonnie Sassy, speaking out about feeling relief after a long-awaited arrest and knowing that the Chevy Avalanche allegedly seen picking Amber up helped lead to his capture.
You know, thank God, because I was thinking they'll never catch him.
2 Chevy Avalanche trucks belonging to Heuermann were towed from his properties. Incidentally, we obtained court filings in Brooklyn that reveal Heuermann has an open lawsuit against a Long Island woman claiming she crashed into his 2012 Chevrolet in Williamsburg last year, leaving him with serious injuries.
2 weeks ago, this individual was walking amongst our streets in New York City in Massapequa Park, and now confined to a 6x9 cell.
The Suffolk County Sheriff giving insight into the accused serial killer's life in isolation, saying he's been withdrawn while being watched around the clock.
It said to us that he would not give us any issues, or he wouldn't be any problems to us while he was in incarceration.
Well, he's met with no visitors except for his attorney. And now that investigators have Heuermann's DNA sample, they are scanning a national database to determine if he's possibly connected to any other unsolved cases. This is a process, though, which takes some time to complete.
For more evidence against alleged serial killer Rex Heuermann is intensifying. Investigators are digging up the backyard of his home in Massapequa Park. They're also using ground-penetrating radar and police dogs to help with the search. Suffolk County Police have not commented on what they found so far. Heuermann is charged with killing 3 women. Their bodies were discovered along Gilgo Beach in 2010.
Jessica Taylor's head and hands were cut off when she was found in Manorville 20 years ago. Investigators finding them on Ocean Parkway in 2011. She was an escort working in New York City, reported missing out of Washington, D.C. She was identified by a tattoo the killer failed to fully scrape off her hip.
Serial killers whose motives are sexual have a fair number of commonalities. One is the desire to inflict pain and suffering.
Jessica Taylor and Valerie Mack, another dismembered victim found in Manorville, were tied to the Gilgo Beach serial killer or killers. 2 law enforcement sources told me they were tied up in a very cruel way. One saying their leg area was bound in a ball. You'd have to be a hunter to do something like that. The second source said the knees were brought into their chest area. We talked to the second source about 2 men who have been discussed in connection to the Mack-Taylor murders. Convicted killer John Bitroff, a carpenter who lived in Manorville and went to prison in 2017 for killing 2 sex workers in the early 90s. And Rex Heuermann, the Midtown architect who allegedly picked up some of his escorts in Manhattan before murdering them. He is charged in connection with the Gilgo 4, whose bodies were intact and bound in burlap. One source said of Bitroff and the Manorville bodies, "We're looking at him very closely, but we're not ruling out Heuermann." The Suffolk County District Attorney, though, is not commenting on law enforcement theories about the Gilgo others. We met him in Massapequa Park when the search of Rex Heuermann's home was finished up on Tuesday after 12 days.
Our investigation, focused on the Gilgo 4. We're going to continue to investigate that case, prepare that case for trial, and we have our investigation now has become public, obviously, and also it's broadened. So we're going to look at the other instances where bodies were recovered in that area as well.
The DA said lab experts will now look for trace DNA, blood, and hair fibers in the massive amounts of evidence taken out of Rex Heuermann's house in Massapequa Park. That could take quite some time. The DA pointing out this week, it's not like live TV.